if someone were to show me what the trail was, I would maybe I'm being honest, I'm sorry.
Does anybody have any questions about the town party?
Any itinerary already
Not
set
yet,
up? Or
no, it's real.
Just barely getting underway.
Just trying to get everybody to buy in.
Okay,
All you guys, all the town departments. That's what I'd like.
okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. So I hope you guys will do part.
We will do something, I'm sure.
All right. Thanks, guys. Sorry to take your time.
Okay, are the Schweitzers here? You want to come up to the table?
Put one of the little speakers next to you. when you're-
Pat and Craig
Oh,
Schweitzer.
if any of you haven't signed in, there's a sign-in sheet over there. We want to make sure we get everybody's name so we know who's interested, etc. Could you pass this map around to them? To the Schweitzers.
Oh.
I will initiate this by saying there have been a lot of issues around forestry and about Howley Hill Road, which is an unmaintained town road. And most of those issues have been resolved or set aside. But the one that's relevant to the Conservation Commission is that the Schweitzers have a right of access to use that road to access their forestry. And in preparing the road for that, the logging company flattened the road completely. So there's just sharp edges with no berms at the edges. So our concern was that if there is a lot of rain or if there's a lot of flooding, especially after they rip up that road a little bit, that silt could get washed down and over those unbermed edges into the stream, which we do have jurisdiction over. It doesn't fall, it isn't under the jurisdiction of the forester because it's not considered a logging road. It's just considered a road being used for access. So we sent a letter to the Schweitzers asking them to have their loggers or themselves to put probably wattles at those places along the road where we felt there was the stream ran directly underneath, or the road is very, very close to the river so that there isn't a place for filtration if mud goes off the road. And they had some questions, so.
Yeah, first of all, obviously you did a field visit. Can you tell me when you did that?
We've been there several times, but the first one, November, I think, yeah.
And you saw loggers
No.
working on a road?
No,
That's the first mistake. Loggers didn't do anything to the road. The road washed out in July and August. Okay, and I've got all of the weather reports from ESIA's, all of the storms, the wettest July in the road.
well, that,
In August, the road
that
washed
information
out.
came from Doug Hutchison, the service forester. He told us that the road was flattened so that the large trucks would be able to get through.
What Doug said was they made 4 runoffs. They didn't do any work to the edge of the road other than to make 4 runoffs. The road washed away in July and August. I was kind enough to regrade it, but the whole road bank washed off. You're making erroneous assumptions based on a complaint from somebody who lives up the road.
No, it's
That's
not based on that
unjustified.
at all. It has nothing to do with him.
Well, did
It
you
has
see the
only to do
loggers?
with our jurisdiction over the road,
Right.
the fact that you maintain the road and that you're going to use the road for logging access, and that we're worried about silt.
You've made an
There's
erroneous
4
assumption.
There's 4 relatively short distances, maybe at the most 2 tables length, that
Right.
we feel need to be protected.
Yeah,
So-
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Let me interject here.
I just would like you to know the history of this road. As you know, it's. a
Yeah, I
dis-
think we do.
but-
We've been
but
into it.
please, may I? It's a road that's been discontinued, and Betty Markham, an elderly woman, lived up there for years and years. And Craig maintained that road in order to have her be able to pass over it. So
Spend
it's
thousands plowing
discouraging
the
for
road.
us to hear that we are being looked down upon for the condition of the road.
No,
And this
that-
is a
And that's
complaint.
all
This
of
is a
that,
complaint from the butter.
all
You
of
went to the
that has,
highway department?
no, all of that has nothing to do with the fact that we have jurisdiction over the edge of the road. You're the people who are currently maintaining the road, and we need to have some kind of protection put where silt can run into the water. That's all. All the rest of it is irrelevant. It has to do with highway and forestry and everything else. The only part that concerns the Conservation Commission is those unprotected edges.
So the 4 little runoff areas, you want riprap there? Is that what you would like?
What we'd like is wattles.
Well, I would just assume do the work and put riprap in a water runoff, in a swale. Wattles
The
aren't
places
gonna
we're talking about have no swale. The places
Okay,
we're talking
yes.
about are literally up against like the river edge where it passes over the culvert. And so I think the only way to protect it, you can't even stake hay bales there, I think, because they'll be in the way. That's why we picked wattles. Wattles are low. And if for some reason the truckers had to get, they could move those and
They
use
don't.
that.
They don't. So
But
like I say, the only activity that the logger did there was in 4 places, take the width of a bucket to make runoff spots. So the water doesn't just flow over the edge.
yeah, there are some
Where the
spots that we did see
stormwater-
like that.
Where the storm water washed off the berms.
Yeah.
The truckers did not move berms. The stormwater washed the berm off.
Well, there currently are no protections to the
That's
river.
right.
And
That's right.
since you are taking responsibility for the road, we are told by the highway department that that's your responsibility. We're told by the forester that that's your.
It's
So,
my responsibility to clean runoff
no,
from a town road.
It's not our
It
responsibility.
is not our responsibility
We
whatsoever.
have, Craig has voluntarily done that, so it's not our responsibility to take care of the road. But we will take a look at the specifics of the locations you're talking about. But please, it is not our responsibility. It's just been a service that we have provided to try and keep that road passable.
Those,
Storm. and I've
yeah,
got-
these aren't bent over places. These are very sharp cut. Essentially, the road is flat, the dirt is right there, and the water is here, and that's where we're worried about.
Okay,
There's only like I said, 4 small places. We have a couple people who can walk that with you
oh,
and
that'd be good.
show you where the spaces are.
I'm not sure what wattles will do. I mean, you're looking to recreate a berm? Is that what you're looking
No,
for?
we're just, there are a couple of divots, but we don't think that they're gonna be, up farther up towards the filter, that where it's wider and there's filter. But we don't feel that in the storms we've been having lately, that's gonna be sufficient. If it gets down to, for instance, where the culvert crosses, that edge has nothing to keep it from going straight into the stream. That's where we're worried about.
Understood. And I'm wondering why it's my responsibility. First of all, the loggers didn't remove the berms. So this is erroneous.
But
The
that
places-
doesn't,
Can
that
I speak,
doesn't
please?
change
No.
our jurisdiction.
Okay, then why am I responsible to maintain a road
We were
that is
told
town property?
to take it up with
Interesting
you.
question. It's
Why
an
is it
interesting
my
question.
responsibility?
It's an interesting question because what I've been trying to say is we've just done it to keep the road passable, which it would not have been had. no
Well,
one
then
if
I-
you
been
prefer, we can refer it to the select board. We're going by what the forester told us and what the highway department told us.
Well, I think the forester may have been misunderstood.
Yeah, I think that was because the forester called me many times and told me that there was complaints by the abutter. Okay,
But
over.
that's
excuse
way
me.
over here. That has nothing to do with the
No, and he
conservation
said that
commission.
they also called and said, I want you to re-inspect the forestry that's going on. And he said, I'm not gonna. They have a permit. They've done nothing
No.
wrong.
He told us there's not a problem there. There's
There
no
you go.
problems
There you
with
go.
the forestry.
So there's
Our
not a
issue
problem
is
with
only with the
forestry.
runoff from the road.
There's not a problem with the forestry. Natural storms washed away the berms. The town owns the property. why is it my responsibility and why am I even here?
Well, you can schedule a time with the select board if you want to, or you can just
No,
put
I
up the
wanna solve
wattles.
the
Those are
problem.
kind
There
of
will
the
be a
choices.
cost associated. with
Yeah, I
it,
mean-
So that's
There will.
right,
Basically, the highway department told us they've washed their hands of it and they're not
Absolutely.
right.
dealing with it, but we still have silt that's gonna go in the water, so somebody has to fix it.
So why is it me?
Well, I was told by the forester that it's you, so we accepted that.
You
No,
say
no,
it's
no,
our
no, no,
responsibility?
that, I would like to see, I would like to document that because he told me everything we've done has been according to our permit.
Yes,
and
he
according to law. I would
only,
like to see that documented.
he only has jurisdiction, the forester only has jurisdiction over what's in the forest cutting plan, inside essentially your parcel lines. He doesn't have jurisdiction over the road. He told us that the road was flattened by you. The highway department said it's yours, it's not their
Doug Hutchins said
responsibility. That
Doug
leaves
Hutchins
you.
said that?
Hmm?
Doug Hutchins, the forester, said that?
Yes, he did.
He probably said there were.
He
those-
specifically said in a letter that I know was sent to you that it's not a logging road. It may not be a maintained town road, but it's an access road that you have right of access
And
through.
in that letter, he said that we removed the burns.
No, he didn't.
That's right, he didn't. And I have a copy of the letter and I called him and he said, what you've done is perfect. And these other.
I
abutters
had a
keep
long
complaining.
phone conversation with him and I said, can you ask the logging folks to do something about the wattles at the sides of the road to prevent that runoff? And he said, that's outside his forestry jurisdiction. So that leaves
So thus.
who's
him
maintaining
saying
the
that-
roads
him
is
So-
responsible.
saying That maintaining the road is our responsibility.
But you could, I'm fine if you want to take it to the select board.
If you tell me exactly what you want me to do and it's reasonable, I'll do it. But I will not take responsibility for runoff from a rainstorm, washing berms away. And in your letter, you said that the loggers did that.
We were
They
told the loggers
absolutely
did that.
not.
We were told by the forester
were-
that the loggers did that. That they were
No,
preparing the
no,
road
he
for
didn't say
access.
that.
He
I would like
told
to
you
see
they
that
made-
documented.
They made the. whatever
They
they
made
call it.
the 4 runoff swales. That's it. They didn't remove the berms. The storm did that.
So
All right.
anyway, it might have been better if we started talking about this before getting a letter that to us feels very accusatory about our logging.
Based on a complaint from an abutter,
Which
not from the
honestly,
forester.
which honestly, what this logging operation is we have been awarded and participating with the U.S. Department of Agriculture, the Natural Resources Conservation Service to try and strengthen the forest.
Yeah, we
by
don't have
getting all of
Any
the
issues? We
dead-
don't have any issues with the forestry.
But I think.
I'm a very strong advocate of forestry, but we do have issues with mud getting in the
If you
street.
can tell me specifically what you want and if it's reasonable, I'll do it. Any more than that,
We'd like wattles placed at the 4 places
how many
where
lineal
the stream
feet?
is too close.
How many
They
lineal feet?
they will come up and point them out to you and you can measure.
And bear in mind, those berms were not removed by the logger. This is based on hearsay complaint, this entire letter. Okay,
Well, I think you also have to refer to the lawyer's letter, which was extremely threatening. And we have to also respond to that because he threatened us as well as everybody else.
the lawyer's letter.
Yes.
Oh, he didn't threaten you. We have a contract for $68,000 to cut the trees. The
And
abutters
that's
have
fine.
been complaining to the select board, to the highway department,
Yes,
To the state forest.
to the
Yes.
state
but
forester.
we're just
3 times
asking
to the highway
for
department. who
water
ignored
protection.
them.
That's all.
You're the
We
only ones
are
who
not asking
listen.
for anything else.
So we'll have to arrange.
Send a letter
time
with
to-
exactly what you want. And please,
I did that.
how many lineal feet of wattles?
Well, we wouldn't know. You
I
have
don't
to
think you did
decide.
that then. Okay, I can see where we're going here.
I just asked you to consider the purpose of what we're trying to do up there and what we have done on behalf of that road.
Oh, we totally agree. We're pro forestry. We think it's a great idea. It helps the wildlife. It helps the water
Just bear in
absorption.
mind the storm washed away. The property is town property. You're telling me it's my obligation to maintain it.
We're asking you to.
That's not. what
It's
it
not,
says
we're
here.
not saying you have a legal responsibility, we're asking you to.
Okay, thank you.
Any questions? Secondary parts, but we only care about the silt and the stream. That's it. Okay, now we have a an order of conditions for Scantic Road Lot 2. Okay, it was being held for the people who hadn't been there recently to do a site visit. Somebody want to report? This is, it was a lot that was sold a couple of times since it had an order of conditions. So at our last meeting, we the old order of conditions and we opened a new NOI for this property, and it includes a septic system, a house, some other grading work, and replaces the old order of conditions. Yeah, it's Todd Pelletier. Was that Heather? Yeah, Heather.
Heather.
So. Thing, she said, she has flagged wetlands, but anything else that was done previously is no good. Whatever flagging, silt fencing and all that is no good. So
Okay.
that's all that we do.
Has to be done totally from
Yes.
scratch.
Other than as far as where the house goes and septic and all that, I'm fine with it.
Yeah.
There's no problems. Just it needs to be
Matter of fact, she actually found some of the silt fencing was actually not correct.
The permanent
The-
boundary
its
markers
placement.
as well, right?
yes, those haven't been done yet. Yeah, the silt fence where it is just all in the wrong place.
Okay. We sent around copies. Does anybody have any questions about the orders of conditions, which we did review at the last meeting?
No.
Greg,
I'm fine with it.
you went?
Yeah, I agree with Tom. If you look at the property, you walked it, there's some discrepancy about the silt fencing, which we talked about. That was where the property owners were.
Yeah, that's in her report. And who else went?
The three of us, me.
Yeah. And did you have any comments?
No, I agree with them. It's fine.
Okay, somebody want to
It-
make a motion to accept the orders of
I
conditions?
make a motion to accept the order of conditions as reviewed last week.
Okay. This is for DEP number 1790232 at Lot 2 Scantic Road, parcel 946-2. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Oh, I didn't get a second. Did you get a second?
Greg
Okay. All right. We'll send this around for signatures. I can find it. Ah, there it is. Mr. Pelletier isn't here, is he? Heather did give us her phone number, but I don't think we have any questions for her. Okay. Okay. All right. Now I'm going to open the hearing for 530 Glendale Road. And before we actually do that, you can come sit up here so people can hear you. This is a proposal for a solar facility. This is our initial, we've had a very brief meeting just to figure out what he was doing. This is our initial public hearing. Ted has some things he can put up so people can see better. And this is going to be a very long process. I'm going to put that up front just because there are a lot of wetlands, there are a lot of issues that have to be dealt with when you do a solar. They're in the first part, the part that we're starting tonight called an ANRAD. It's an abbreviated notice of resource area delineation. So basically what it is a way to upfront of a project, have us determine and agree upon where the wetlands are, what kind of wetlands they are, what rules about wetlands apply, rivers, streams, whether the streams are perennial or intermittent, how many trees are there, what's the quality of the forest is, what animals or any other natural heritage or other program designation may be on this site. In this case, there isn't any natural heritage designation for those of you that are familiar with that, but there is a critical natural landscape and a couple of other things. So all of those get dealt with in the ANRAD, and it'll take 2 or 3 meetings to get through that, which means 2 or 3 months essentially, unless there's something very urgent. And then after the ANRAD, and after that's all agreed upon, they will go away and they will create a notice of intent, which includes the solar structures, the storage, the roads, the noise levels, the fencing, the lighting, wiring, poles, all of that. That all doesn't get considered in the ANRAD, that all gets considered in the notice of intent. Some of you have handouts delineating that, but we only made 20 handouts. So if you can share, if 2 of you in a family have one, pass it around. Yes.
What about zoning? Joint written discuss and determine whether that property is-
Yeah, we don't, the way the solar laws work, you can't, well, East Long Meadow is now fighting a case in court, but the general current standing is that you can't across the board zone out. You can't say in all this zone, there can be no solar. But what you can do is you can say, our job as the Conservation Commission is to say where in the where can and can't be built, because it can't be built on wetlands. How they have to cross streams, where the poles can go, where the roads can go. And then,
Property also in agriculture?
no, it's not. But we'll get to that question later, okay? So all of that wetland stuff and a few ownership things and things like that, they get discussed in the ANRAD. Then it includes all the actual solar part, as well as all the access and all that other part. So that will be an entirely separate process. The other thing to know is that we have, there are regulations that allow conservation commissions to hire a skilled consultant, typically a consultant company that has geologists, wetland specialists, animal specialists, all sorts of stuff like that. And we will be talking about, especially tonight, about hiring the person and what things need to be included in that contract. Next meeting, we will probably sign that contract. We'll get it proposed and that's a somewhat complex arrangement, but if you have questions and the handouts don't answer, we can answer those questions tonight. So first, I will introduce Rory Walker. And I'm sorry, I don't remember your name.
Nick Fastenal.
Right, Nick Vasandola. You're the project manager.
Yes, so I'm a licensed civil engineer in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and my firm prepared the application paperwork, and we did the survey work that was out here. The wetland delineation was done by a subcontractor of ours, Goddard Consulting. They did the wetland delineation and provided the report and associated field delineation sheets.
Okay. Okay, so I'm going to open the hearing officially. All right, because this is an official public hearing, it has to be opened and closed each time and continued. Okay, Rory, do you want to explain the project to us, or do you want him to?
Again, at a very high level, this is, the address, again, it was a 530 Glendale Road. It's about 53 acres. At this present time, we're just like delineating
Ted, could you put it from there?
the wetlands area.
He's finding the map.
Got it, okay.
You want the-
Yes, please.
So once again, for the record, Nick Fastenal, Level Design Group. Just to follow up on what Rory said, the parcel is located at Glendale Road. The address is 530.
Louder?
Oh, I'm sorry.
You've got a little mic there, maybe you can just put it closer to you.
I'll turn this.
Well, that's only gonna go
Oh,
to
that's
this.
just for
yeah.
recording?
That's only
Okay.
recording.
So the owl's supposed to be looking at you.
Correct. So it's following up on what the chair said. This is, sure everybody knows what we're looking to do here. Rory has come to commission before and stated his intentions. They want to develop this parcel as a solar development. We're not talking about the solar development tonight and for the next few meetings. That's going to be handled under a separate application, which will have a separate review and multiple other hearings associated with that. This evening, we are here to discuss the on-site resource areas that are protected under the Wetlands Protection Act and also under the local bylaw. Because the town of Hampton has a local wetlands bylaw. So in doing so, we hired a professional wetland scientist to go out and field delineate the site. So all the colored lines on the plans that you can see up there, and you can go walk up and take a look at that plan, are some.
Do you want to stand up by it so you can
Sure.
point to the areas?
Associated, essentially protected areas. So the green line on the plan is a delineated wetland. So that's an area where water runs off to. It has very specific plant life, specific soils, and water travels through that area and connects to an intermittent stream or river or another wetland. So there's three factors that are considered when determining what is a wetland. Line is a 25-foot buffer zone. The town has a 25-foot no disturb zone. So 25 feet off the edge of that green line, we can't build anything. We can't touch, we can't dig, we can't do anything. So I added that line to the plan. And then the orange line defines the 100-foot buffer zone. So the 100-foot buffer zone is a regulatory buffer zone imposed by the state. The Conservation Commission also recognizes that area. And anytime you do any work within 100 feet from one of these resource areas, you're required to file with the Conservation Commission. You file a notice of intent, and then the commission then reviews the project, and then through their review, make changes, coordinate the wetland edge, and then they issue what's called the order of conditions, which is a list of conditions for the project. Some of them run with the life of the project, some of them are specific to construction. That's kind of just a small quick intro of the process. On this property, I'm sure everybody's somewhat familiar with it, as you are all like the butters and received those nice green cards here to sign for in the mail. We have a series of wetlands, an intermittent stream, and a perennial stream. So kind of down through this area, right through here, is the East Brook. So that blue line down here, that kind of cuts right up through the bottom of the property is East Brook. East Brook is what's defined as a perennial stream. So that means water flows through that stream 365 days a year. It continuously flows, and a perennial stream has a more aggressive regulatory requirements imposed by the state. There's a 200-foot area where you can do limited work, and then there's a 100-foot area from the edge of the bank of the stream where they essentially don't want you to do any work. They want you to leave that area pristine. They call those the riverfront areas or riparian zones.
You want to post up that one? You want to post
No,
up
I think that
that? Okay.
just kind of given.
Does anybody having trouble figuring out where those are?
So it's right down through
It's
here.
it's that strong blue line and then the dotted lines that go towards the project from it.
Correct. So. So East Brook eventually does tie into the Scandic River, way further down, a couple miles, maybe a mile or two to the south of the property. Through this area, right through here, starting on the abutters parcel, there's an intermittent stream which runs down through here. It's this light blue line that kind of runs all the way down through here, comes through this wetland area, and is actually the property line between this parcel and the abutter here to the east, right through that area. So there are wetlands on either side of that intermittent stream. So what an intermittent stream is a stream that does not run full all year round. Primarily, you'll see it running full in the spring after the snow melt and the spring rain. It'll typically dry up for 3 to 5 days, maybe longer time periods during the summer months. So that area is that comes down through here. Also on the property, so you can see the wetlands. So pretty much there's the old horse track, which everybody's familiar with, and I know there was a history with that work that was done. That's all primarily upland area as we have it delineated. In the upland area, upland means there's no wetlands through that area. And that comes up and around and through the back of the parcel. There's an upland pocket centered through this part right here with wetlands on both sides. All these wetlands essentially tie to the East River. This large complex eventually drains down towards the East River right through here. And this other smaller wetland complex drains towards this intermittent stream channel, which eventually ties into the East Brook. Site grading is kind of all over the place. It's not just a continuous grade. There's undulations all throughout the parcel. Obviously, this area is well disturbed. You get the horse track, you have the barn right there. This area up here is primarily wooded in the back. And what else do we have here? That pretty much describes the wetlands in the process as a whole. I don't know if the commission would like me to kind of go over anything else, or if you guys have any general questions.
No, why don't we wait for questions? You can just sit on the edge there.
Okay, yeah.
DEP, I wanted to note, has both a very specific policy called 17.1 about solar, where solar can be sited, and what exceptions and non-exceptions it can get. They strongly discourage placing any arrays or any parts of the facility in what's called BVW, or bordering vegetated wetlands, which is a kind of wetland with vegetation in it. They presume that you will only use uplands, and that if you're going to use uplands to replace something you're damaging, then you could have put the array in those uplands. So that's kind of where they start with their general guidelines. And they have very specific rules about the forest, destroying the forest canopy, and that sort of thing, about impacts adjacent to the solar panels, and several other things that we'll go through. One of the things that affects the kinds of rules that apply is what the former classification of the land was. And currently, it's R6 residential. It's also been under the 61B program, which classifies it as recreational, but not agricultural. So that defines which rules apply to it in specific. There are certain parts of it, the access road going in, that may qualify as what's called a limited project. It means they get a little bit of leeway. One of the things that we'll look at in that second part is whether that access road would qualify as a limited project. All right, now, if you have like a general question about like how many milliwatts it's going to be, or generally where the panels are expected to be, I'm going to allow you that kind of space to ask questions, just because I know this is an early meeting. But otherwise, most of your questions should apply to the wetlands and how the wetlands get treated. Back there?
Throughout Sullivan, 563 Glenville Road. Glenville Road. We operate on a well. And obviously, there are wetlands in that area. The question is, does anybody know if there is an aquifer?
There's not an official aquifer on what I would call the right-hand side, if you're looking north. There is an aquifer quite distant on the other side, but there's no official aquifer, no.
Okay, so we're all drawing water from well, we're all independent, well, not drawing from
Yes.
similar common aquifers.
One of the ways that gets dealt with is when we get the NOI, the actual project proposal, there are a lot of rules about how much water can run off into the soil, how hard it can hit, how it gets contained, stormwater basins, and any other kinds of things that get put in to retain the water so that it filters downward, and other sorts of things that pertain to the water flow. Yes?
I guess my general concern was with a environmental leak, chemical leak into the ground, that might get into an aquifer. Might affect the lake and I understand you're limited, but you do certain things about water. Even solar panels mounted uphill, they're next to the wetland. If the leak has a period, they're gonna leak in the downward.
Yeah, that's certainly a valid concern. And we can, I haven't talked much about the peer review, but as I said, we're allowed to hire a second environmental consultant.
That's what it was.
And what that person does is they check all of this, all of those little black dots there are flags that have been put up by the proposal company to delineate the edge of the stream, the mean annual high water line, all of those riparian areas and buffers. They also will do other things that we ask them. And one thing we can ask them for is an opinion about whether we should be testing water runoff, how we can best evaluate that. That's the kind of thing, but that would be under the NOI, under that second group of processes. I will put it in my notes so we have it for then.
Very basic, general question. Why would anyone with 53 acres solar field in the woods, dark woods, where there's water and animals and coyotes and animals and more animals? Why? There's so many other places to put solar panels on everybody's roofs, in fields where there's sun. There's no sun out there. I just don't understand that. Answer that to me.
They're gonna cut them off.
I think that goes to you, Roy.
The short answer is that,
I don't
the main reason for the property is that we have the ability to actually allow the electrons to get to the grid. As I'm sure a lot of you heard, like the biggest problem in Mass is not being able to connect to the grid anymore, because there's
You're
so
not
much solar.
answering my question. Why in those bush with the animals are you going to ruin that habitat in those woods?
Well, I
It
mean, in general,
Solar.
it's
is
just like
solar,
any
do solar
development. So this
everywhere.
is a project that's just like any development, where if somebody's gonna do a subdivision, you're gonna develop the land. And, you know, let me reiterate, the whole parcel is 53 acres. The solar field isn't gonna cover the entire parcel. There's a lot of wetlands. It's gonna consume maybe 20 acres ballpark with the stormwater basins. That's a rough estimate. Please don't hold me to that number. But, you know, and as far as this area, what Rory was trying to say is this site has a good area. It's a good area for it to be interconnected to the grid. So when the utility company looks at a solar project, they look at where the property is, how efficiently can they get the energy from this development to one of their substations, and the power can then go out to the grid. So that's essentially the long and short of it. But I mean, you can ask that question of any development. Why would you cut houses down to build a house? Why would you cut trees down to build anything? That's just a general question. We don't like doing, cutting down trees that we don't have to. We're gonna design this property around the wetlands. We're gonna keep as much as we're not gonna disturb any wetlands if it's not necessary. Maybe there may be one limited crossing if needed. We're gonna be respectful of the area and do our best to come up with a project that fits this parcel, fits the approved wetland line, whether it's this or whether it's a different version of this after it's reviewed. We're gonna do our best to do that. But the long and short of it is, that's the general answer. It's just land development as a whole.
I have a question. How many acres of trees, or will you not have to cut any trees?
There will be trees that need to be cut. You know, we are going to utilize the open track area. So a large portion of
There'll
that,
be not many trees cut.
I can't say, there's no specific number of trees at this current moment.
I
We
mean,
don't
an
have
acre,
plan.
2 acres, 3 acres.
We can't say for sure.
I think the main acre of trees that we're, main area of trees that we're concerned about is that upper section that points to the right there, that
No longer
square,
than that.
that is forest.
And that would be cut.
A portion of that would be cut, yes. There are buffer zones that are required to be maintained as far as the current bylaws. We will be staying at with respect to the buffer zones.
And the other thing I have to ask,
That area
and then
there.
I'll let it go. If you're giving power to a substation, you have to put poles in, and where is the substation? That you're gonna use, not national.
Wilbraham,
Wilbraham.
Yes, natural grid.
All right, so new poles will have to be put through where?
Along Glendale Road.
All along Glendale
We're
Road.
just
So-
gonna, so there's one wire now, you'll have 3 wires, which is part of the project. Which will
Going
have
from the
to-
site into the Wilbraham end.
yeah. Again, that goes into that second set of stuff, because we have to talk about that. We have to see where the poles would be, how many panels they're putting in, with how far they go in the forest,
But
and
you
all
have
that
no
sort of stuff.
idea The acreage of the trees, no one knows that.
We estimated it. but,
Was there an
My
estimate?
understanding from the selectmen meeting was 10 acres
acres?
Maximum.
10 acres. So
cut trees.
There's no, again, there's only, yes.
the government mentioned it was 10 acres.
At the time, it was, no more, there was a number given, sure, it was 8 or 10, and it would be no more than 10 acres.
Yeah. There are, since some of the other solar facilities have gone in town, as time has gone along, DEP has, and the Department of Energy have put out more detailed guidelines. Some of those guidelines give us a little more power than we used to have. They delineate a little bit more about what we can request. And tree canopy comes under that. So we have a little bit more leeway than we used to have.
We have it as mows, we have a contract that mows, maybe the landowner that will, twice a month will cut vegetation onto the panels, and it's not hit by the roads. There's
No.
there's no overtime, no.
Vegetation management, again, goes into the NOI. Everything goes into the NOI. I know it sounds like, but that they have to know where the wetlands are and that we agree where the wetlands are before they can make their final determination about where they're going to put everything. But generally speaking, you can't put the things in the wetlands. In some very rare cases, they can extend into the buffers, and anything that they have to cut to keep shade is also calculated. And there are preferred ways of getting that shade. That's called selected trimming versus cutting down all the trees that the department favors. So that all gets considered in the final orders of conditions for the NOI.
May I add one comment to your question? This site will also be like seeded with pollinator seeds. We want to help bees. It'll be certified by that. So the whole site will have a special pollinator seed to emphasize on the bees. Like they're emphasizing that the DOE. So that will be noted in the formal intent of the town.
Can I ask a couple of questions?
Sure,
Dave Dio, my wife, Mariana, I live on 548 Glendale.
right next door then.
Not in the water, but pretty close. Yeah. Couple of questions. I think one of them's already been answered, because some of our neighbors have just been kind of trying to get the facts, find out some information since we got the certified letter in February. We're going to request a third-party review. It sounds like that's something that's already.
Yes.
done.
Well, not yet, but it will be.
But thank you. And I understand one of the next steps in the process will probably be like a site visit.
Yes,
And is that something that will be done maybe more towards springtime when vegetation's moved?
yeah,
Animals
it's,
will be more active in terms of the natural.
the consultants can't really do work when the ground is frozen and they haven't seen what kind of, because a lot of determining where the wetlands are is not just looking at the water that's running around, it's looking at specific plants that are growing in particular places. It's taking soil cores so they can see the hydrology of what's underneath. In our specific case, this property had a lot of contention around it. What years? The 80s, 90s, yeah. And at that point in time, delineations were done, and that front stream was not, at that point in time, considered intermittent, it was considered perennial. So one thing we'll specifically be asking the consultants to do is to give us their opinion on that particular designation. Because that, an intermittent stream has a 100-foot buffer, perennial stream has a 200-foot buffer. And sometimes when a stream runs through a wetlands, it can be intermittent or it can be perennial, depending on how much the water moves within the wetland in a distinct path. So all of that gets,
Can I follow up on that real quick?
yes.
Can you share that determination with me? 'Cause I went through the, stopped at the office and dug through the file. I didn't see anything that specifically called that out. I may have missed it, so if there is a document. that
Bonnie has
defined-
all the former documents categorized and laid out in the office so people can come and
Yeah, he spent,
look at all of
I
it.
spent-
couple hours,
I
I mean.
looked at everything.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's not true, but if there was something, I would, if you could provide that
Yeah.
document to me, and I'll share that with the scientists, because they weren't aware of that, and they made this determination based on their field observations.
Yeah.
In reality, the channel is 3 feet wide, so it doesn't really fit the definition of a perennial stream. That's it's more or less a drainage channel, draining these areas, and it'll run after it rains, it'll run during the spring.
Mhm.
And when we delineated it, it was a very wet season. And
Yeah.
our wetland scientist is highly qualified, did not make that conclusion just without even knowing the history of the site.
Yeah, and I think,
So,
not to go on about that, but I think part of the problem was back in the, looking at all the files back in the late 80s, when they were building that track, they were taking the fill from the center of the tracks, I guess they had a bank and all that, and dumping it into that stream.
but even still up here, we delineated it all the way up through here.
Yeah,
And it was still
Yeah.
just, but we'll cross
Yeah.
that bridge when we get there. I'm just saying, if there is something in the file, we would just like to make sure we can go over that and review that properly.
because he also created what I read was he dammed up something also.
Yeah, there were a lot
Yeah,
of
there was a
issues.
lot of weird things. that were
And
going on
created
there.
a
We're not
pond.
gonna do that.
This is
Yeah.
probably a good point to take a little break. We need to specifically vote to accept the person that Bonnie and I have to say, have chosen to be our consultant group. She discussed with several people. And this whole prior issue, the original delineations weren't done by Ty and Bond, but a lot of the final court case issues were dealt with by Ty and Bond. So they have all the maps from before and all that sort of thing, which will allow you to consult with them if you want to. And they have assigned Melissa Cody, who, was she actually involved directly in this before?
I don't
she's-
even know if she was born, no.
She's just, I guess, she would be our primary liaison with Ty and Bond. And they've already gone through the conflict of interest questions, because Ty and Bond does a lot of work for the town, and we had to make sure there weren't any conflicts there. But the answer was no conflicts. So we need to vote to have Melissa Cody and Ty and Bond write up a contract for a peer review.
Question, who is responsible for paying the fee for that?
Oh, yes, it is on those papers, but I will address that. There's a specific law that allows us to hire this person to get expertise, and that's paid for by the proponent. So
It doesn't come out of your taxes.
no, none of it comes out of your taxes. What happens is we tell them what we want them to review, which specific things we want them to pay attention to, and then there's some standard things they do anyway. And that's all written into a contract with an estimated cost and maybe some estimations about if there's other things that go on afterwards, like how many meetings they have to come to and that sort of thing. Then when we sign the contract and the proponent signs the contract and Ty and Bond signs the contract, then the proponent puts the estimated money into a special account that's kept by our town treasurer. It's just set aside in a particular account. And when the project is completed and the bills come in, the peer reviewer is paid out of that account.
Thank you.
The first account will only be for the ANRAD, and then there'll be a whole nother account for the NOI.
I just wanted to mention when we were talking about the street. My name is Darla. We are butters, and that stream, maybe in August, it's dried up a little bit, but it's a very active stream.
And they will definitely look at that. Excuse
It's
me.
up to the
There's
professional.
several criteria. They have to do with whether it shows up on old USGS maps, which it does in 39, and in most of the recent years that there's maps for 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. It doesn't show up in the 1885 map, which is the absolute fallback if others, but it does show up on all of the recent mappings. So that's one criterion. Other criteria have to do with what wetlands are around it. We're going to specifically ask them to check the sediment in those wetlands to make sure, to try and determine whether it's natural sediment that was from the stream slowing down and depositing wetlands, or whether it might have been an all at once dump to create the wetlands.
Altered
That
by
would-
man.
That would affect. Yes.
Hi, I'm Lisa Sibyl. I live at 219 Ames with my parents. This is about the map. And I guess my question pertains to the map, but it also pertains to the map that's on the Camden website versus what's on the map mapper. And it looks like there is a small wetland on that parcel that the Camden map says is a marsh bog. It's not on this map. I don't even know if it shows this wetland. But the map will show it as a shallow marsh meadow or a fen. So my question is, which is it? And what map is in the size of it? Because a fen takes 10,000 years to naturally develop. So I don't really understand how any project could possibly mitigate that and replace it.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yes, I noticed that. It's very unusual in Hampton to find a fin.
Well, that
So-
was just strange to me. There was discrepancy.
Yeah, they are very long-term things. They're usually found in other locations.
Right.
But that is one thing. If they see a fin there, they'll tell us. If they don't,
Okay.
but they, again, they look at the wildlife there.
Right.
They look at the plants there. There's also a vernal pool that's just over the border.
Yes,
Um,
that was my other question. If that
That-
would be looked at. because
It's
it
not
wasn't-
certified. So
Right.
under the state rules, it doesn't have much protection.
Okay.
But under the town of Hamden rules, it gets the same buffer as if it was certified,
Oh, okay.
which is 100 feet.
Okay.
So I measured it off, and I don't think much of the buffer sticks into the property. I think, 15 feet maybe or something, but that would be considered.
Okay.
But in the end, yes, nothing on the maps is considered absolute. Basically, all the things that are on either the GIS in town or the mass mapper are suggestions of what's probably there.
Right.
And when the consultants go out, that's kind of what they look for. They look and say, this says fen, is it really a fen?
It just seemed odd that that was like the one thing on the map, It didn't say and or it just said or, so it's like.
It's very
It's a
odd
question
sometimes.
mark, right.
Yeah,
And kind of to
so,
expand on that, that's why we're here.
Right,
Because those maps are created from aerial photography. The professionals that the state hires, they develop those maps based on aerial photography, and that's it. So they can kind of tell boggy areas, different types of wetlands. The state has this process specifically because you can only know where the wetland edge is by going out the field and checking the soil, checking the vegetation, determining if there is what they call a hydraulic connection, means what it borders on something, because there's two types of wetlands. There's bordering vegetative wetlands, which are protected by the Wetlands Protection Act, and there's isolated wetlands, which don't have a hydraulic connection. They're essentially depressions that have developed vegetative
yes,
characteristics of a wetland. Maybe they'll have wetland soils, which they call hydric soils, which is like a dark, kind of muddy, mucky type soil. Those are also protected areas too. Not saying that they're not protected, but they don't have buffer zones associated with them.
some things don't have buffer zones.
Correct. So there's a whole variety of things and that's why the town's gonna hire a consultant,
Okay,
because it is a very complicated process. We wouldn't expect the commission members to be able to go out
okay,
on the site and confirm this. I mean, I'm a licensed engineer and I can't do this type of.
no, it takes
work.
a
It's just
lot of
very
training to go out
specific
there and do
about
this. It's,
discipline that does it.
even we can't do it. That's why we have to hire a consultant.
just to add to that, I know at least looking at maps, I am not a higher educated person, but I can read a map kind of.
Yep.
There were two hydraulic connections on that parcel. It goes, I think it's toward the right, and it feeds into Eastbrook. That was from my research.
Yes, it does show two streams that kind of go out to the middle.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Um,
And these are all, everything on here is what they call bordering vegetative wetlands. So these would all
Yeah.
have buffer zones associated with them. So they're all hydraulically connected.
Yeah, you're
to-
talking about that Y-like area
Yeah,
that
it's
goes
like
right
kinda
to the
like
middle.
a
Yes.
V and a T.
Yes. The other thing to know in this is that the state has recently gone from a mapping system called Oliver
Yeah.
to, they've added in a new mapping system called Mass Mapper, which has a lot more stuff on it. It's really nice because you don't have to go to outside sources to find maps about the kind of forest that's there and all sorts of other things. But those new maps have not been transported into the town maps yet. So when you look at GIS, you're still looking at the old system. When you look at Oliver, which is now called Mass Mapper, it's a different, you'll see slight differences in the map. It's all much newer.
I guess I have one more part to my question about the map. I know it was mentioned in the undergrad that there is no habitat, NSEP would be involved with this project because of the way the map is laid out for endangered or wild or rare wildlife. I find that a little strange, only because when I looked at the map myself online, it seems like the border is almost all the way on the left side of Glendale and almost scoops over to the right side of Glendale.
Yes.
Where 530 is left.
Yes.
So do the animals seem to understand that you're not supposed to cross? Just-
No, the way this happens is, number one, when people build,
Right.
they can apply, there's an exemption for a house and a barn and a
Okay.
whatever. So when that happens, Natural Heritage draws a line around it. So you'll see that there's all these squares taken out at the edge of the road, of Glendale Road. The other thing that happens is every some number of years, I think it's 5, they take all the reports of wildlife, when we see a turtle in town, we call it in with a location and a picture, and they put it in an atlas. And they compare all of those mappings with the things they have determined to be natural heritage. And if it's been 25 years since they've seen anything in a particular area, they will take that area out.
I guess what my question was, because of the tornado, at least on Ames, that affected us, I find it hard to believe those animals didn't move from all of the disturbed wood, because we've seen it ourselves. on
Yeah,
our property
yeah.
on Ames. I don't know if that means that NSEP, that would be enough for NSEP to come out and actually reevaluate physically on the property, because I understand you need to do it aerially.
Yes, what we can do, besides everybody on that road watching for turtles, because if you see one, we can take a picture and we can map it in.
Right.
You can't go on the property, but you can do it all around.
That's just a concern.
But the other thing is, we can, at the time of the NOI, one of the things we can put in that consultant contract, which there will be a whole second one, is called a wildlife habitat assessment.
Does that
and-
also include, I know this is different, it was a little confusing for me, but I know there's also foreign primary habitat. And I know that's on that property, but the rare isn't. So is that? all
Yeah,
the same?
rare and estimated is not there,
Okay,
which are
I
the
understood that, but the other
most
thing-
protective groupings. But it is in critical natural landscape, which is a qualified area. That means it's part of a huge landscape, what are called landscape blocks in this particular case, that are seen as making corridors for animals to move. So when you're considering what's being built there, you have to consider intrusions on migration, for instance. That's something that the wildlife habitat assessment would look at. You know, what kind of fencing would help redirect animals around? Is it going to be a huge intrusion? You can consider lighting that doesn't disturb the animals as much. Other sorts of things like that. And that all comes into the wildlife
Yeah, that was just my
assessment.
concern, just the map seemed kind of strange, and I'm like, is that what we're pursuing, just to make sure in the future, things are, land is protected? You know, that's it, that was my question, that makes sense, thank you.
Yes. Oh, wait, behind you.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you. So, I'm not on Glendale, I'm on Ames Road.
Yes, on the
On
backside.
the other side, but somewhat across from that property. So my concern is removal of 10 acres of woodlands, having been property that literally just got hit by the tornado that did recuperate. We lost over 300 trees in our backlands, and the effect with climate change. And one of the most critical issues with climate is to try to preserve as much of the woodlands as we can. The Amazon being clear cut, we're just gonna have to change
Yeah,
our climate. So the concept of clear cutting 10 acres in an area that's been so devastated and it's just coming back from the tornado from what, 11 years ago.
Yeah. It is considered
that
prime
would be
two
taken
forest, which
because-
is next to the top. And there are very clear,
Take that into account because you seem to be really focusing on the wetlands, which is obviously.
Well, that's our major
Tree
jurisdiction.
removal is all-
that's our
Right,
major
but it needs to
jurisdiction.
be- I don't know. There's no
What
way-
we can say about the forest is there are very specific guidelines about how much forest can be cut, how it can be cut, whether it's trimmed down, whether it's pulled out. Reforestation, we can make rules for that when the facility closes. We can't we can't make an opinion about wanting the forest to stay.
But the solar panels can't do their job if it's reforested where there's canopy.
No, I'm talking about after, there's a lifetime and when we make the orders of conditions for this project, if we do, then we don't have to. I mean, we could decide there's no way we can condition it to be reasonable. But one of the things that you talk about on a notice of intent is all the closing items. What gets done on the property after the solar goes away? You know, what kind of trees get replanted, what kind of vegetation gets replanted. Those are things we do have some control over. Unless they exceed the allowed percentage of tree cutting, we don't have much say about that part. Okay, I'll go back to questions, but we need to take a vote on, somebody make a motion.
Make a motion to accept the contractor for time on there.
Melissa Cody.
Melissa Cody to do a study. The work that's been presented.
Okay, we will review the contract at the next meeting to make sure all the items that we wanted included on it are included on it. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, so we'll ask Melissa to write up a contract and we will probably send that to you in advance so that you have some idea what's on it, so you can speak to those issues at the next meeting.
I asked some of the. My question on that, mostly is to do the solar panel.
No.
We do, panels are made out of silicon.
In the,
I promise to address all concerns about any, because there's lithium ion as well. I promise to address all concerns and questions at a later date.
yeah, that would come up in the NOI with the second consultant review. And we can ask them to give us advice about chemicals that might be problematic and how to manage that.
How many?
Yeah, that comes up in the
Okay.
second chunk. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see you. Oh, Don, this is Don Davenport, our select board member.
The question I have is about the delineation of the wetland. Is it decided retrospectively across that? What I mean is this, that stormwater, climate change, we know that we're gonna have more storms, more frequent storms, so more rain, more water. Is that, is the timeline to look at that? Maybe, this may be something when we talk about storm, when we talk about the solar panels or runoff.
Yes,
But that wetland delineation.
it would come up in the NOI part when we're talking about the panels, where the panels are, how far apart they are, what kind of stormwater stuff there is. One of the things we can ask them to is project in the current projections about, we can't specifically address climate change, but we can ask about runoff.
Because I know the EPA, recently about large storms, particularly in the Northeast.
Yes. It's pretty much a given that everything's going to get rainier and wetter and run off more.
Planning board.
John?
Yeah, there's a woman over here first. She was before I was.
Okay.
I'll follow up when she's.
Okay.
I just had a question about, where we would submit such pictures. Like, we got pictures of bobcat, we got a picture of mountain lion, we have a picture of, what would be a camera. We don't have any pictures of the coyotes, they seem to have disappeared. They died. We don't have as much deer as we used to have.
Yeah.
Must have been.
They're all over town. So pretty much there's a presumption that there's bobcats, coyotes, turkeys, bears, deer, lots of deer, raccoons, skunks. Don't know of any wolves in town, but foxes, lots of foxes, fisher cats.
Where we submit them. I know that we're talking about.
Yeah, the ones that since that's a given that they're there and they're migrating through this
So that you don't need-
critical landscape, you don't really need that. It's taken as a given. However, there are species of special concern in Hamden. There are two kinds of turtles, wood turtles and box turtles. There are 4 kinds of salamanders. Most of them are 4-toed types. There's a climbing fern, and there's a mussel, freshwater mussel. So if any of those things show up, or somebody sees them, they can be added to the atlas.
Oh, all right, I just wasn't sure what you said.
If you need to know how to tell which thing's a box turtle or a wood turtle, you can either ask us or you can go right online and ask. If you put in, I forget exactly what it is, but it's called the Wildlife Atlas, and there's like information sheets there with pictures and everything.
John Matthews, North Hudson Road. So during your NOI, which you probably would have, you'll ask the applicant to do a stormwater review.
Yeah, that part of that review would be, probably we would send the contract to the planning board to try and get some kind of to make sure that things they want included are included on that.
It's all in the general bylaws.
Yeah.
Chapter 14. So you would do that, and then it would be, we'd have them do the stormwater management. Code. And then it would be reviewed by Pine Bond.
Yes,
Thank you.
that doesn't mean the planning board or the special permit people might not want to add other items of review to the stormwater there. That would be in their, purview to do that.
I just have 2 questions on the study itself, but I'm not an environmental engineer, so if I don't get the terminology right, please bear with me. But in reading through it, if I understand it correctly, 14,450 feet of wetland that was identified. And data collection transits were only conducted at 2 wetland flags. It seems kind of, I mean, it's such a large parcel, the size and scope of this. It was just seeming to me, not knowing a lot about it, that there'd be more than that.
Data collection transits, I'm not sure what he's referring to.
Well, we actually did test borings, vegetative analysis.
Oh,
So they
no,
only did it in 2 areas.
no, they do test borings.
So they filled the sheets out for 2 specific areas.
Okay.
The wetland scientists, they walk around with an auger.
Yeah.
And they do the whole thing. It's not that they only did 2, it's that that's what was reported in the forms. I mean,
Yeah.
There's a line, these.
So there were more done than what's reported.
The ones that
Well,
are
we
critical
don't-
to
we don't-
defining the wetlands get reported
You don't
essentially.
report them, but it's maybe so obvious that it's auger down, boom, they look at it, hydric soils, they know, just like that. And then you have, all right, vegetation changes from wetland style plants to upland. I mean, it's a very clear line. If you know what you're looking for. So,
For the
yeah.
wetlands, that's true. When you get to the stormwater in that second part, there's a whole nother set of rules about where they're saying the water's going to run off here and it's going to sink in over here. They have to do a lot of test boring to make sure that it's drainable soil and that the water is going to actually go in and it's not going to run across. They can't have any water running across.
So the two that were at least documented, and one of them wasn't even on the property, it was on the neighbor's property. That just.
No. Where the cottage. There's more here. Okay.
So it's off the parcel, I guess, that just seemed kind of odd.
Yes, I mean, these guys, they don't have the map right there and they're following the wetland line. So sometimes their delineation does go off.
Yeah, they'll take a GIS where they do the boring.
They do their
And
best.
then it gets
But is
put
it
on.
relevant? It's not on the property?
Well, there's relevant things off the property, like that stream in the back.
Okay.
That stream has a 200-foot riverfront, so it extends.
In
On
here,
that stream, I believe you referred to it where it's got a channel 2 to 5 feet wide, okay, if that's the same one I'm thinking of.
The intermittent.
And it had banks 6 inches to 32 inches high.
Correct.
And I guess what I was wondering is 6 inches really isn't that much. I didn't know if that was taken into account with the 200-foot delineation.
There's no 200-foot delineation. We're calling that an intermittent stream.
If it was called perennial, and it may yet be, because we're not sure about that,
Okay.
it would have 200 feet. If it's intermittent, it only gets the 100-foot buffer. It doesn't get a riverfront area that goes with it.
That kind of goes to why we're calling it intermittent. Very not defined banks, it's just going through a
Yeah, there's a lot of
wetland. So
quality.
it's essentially, you have a wetland and the water is kind of funneling to this one little area, this 3
Yeah.
or 5 foot wide area, and it's formed a channel, where when it rains in a significant amount, it drains to that area, and that's why
Yeah.
you see water. flowing
The
through
other
it.
thing to know about, well, two things to know about off-property checks. They can't officially go onto your property or anybody else's property to do testing. So for that part, they project from the maps and make their best estimates from the wildlife and plants and things they can see from on the property. That little square up in the left, we're not on the right map right now. Where the access road, oh yes, we are, where the access road comes in, that's also owned by the owner of this property. So it has an easement essentially to get to this property. So he would give permission to do any kind of cores that need to be done along that roadway.
And lastly, it just gets back to that wildlife habitat study. Has there been one done recently or
No,
no? So is that something we should do?
it gets done before the work gets done. So that gets done. We will talk to them about it when we get this first one done.
Yeah.
And they can choose whether part of it has to do with the work and the work's intrusion. So they might want to do part of it now and part of it in the second half. They might want to just do the whole thing,
But it'll
in
be
the
after
second half.
project is approved?
but it would get done before they get any permission to do anything. Till the NOI is complete and the order of conditions are written and DEP accepts those order of conditions and several other agencies weigh in. Department of Energy has a whole lot of say.
Tell it to the left and back up.
They can't start anything. They can't
It's great
build more
thing.
roads. They can't
To the
cut
wall.
trees. Yes?
Jason Rosso, 239 Ames Road. I serve on a few boards in town. I'm an abutter of this project, so I'll be sitting on any hearings, but I just wanted to let folks know how this project is going to be a lot of questions that developers can't answer right now because we're in the preliminary stages of it. So the first step to decide on this, what happens with this project is agreeing on these boundaries. So they're going to present what they think the boundaries are. The Conservation Commission is going to hire a professional to review that. There's probably going to be 2 or 3 more meetings back and forth before they even decide where the boundaries actually are. Those boundaries are what the Conservation Commission has jurisdiction over. Once that gets decided, the developers are going to go back and actually figure out what they want to do. This Right now, it's all pie in the sky based on what they think. This could all change once their peer reviewer takes a look at it.
That's totally correct.
So after they get this done, the ANRAD, they then have to look at an NOI. Once the NOI, once the intent of the actual project, and that's when they'll have all the project specifics that people are asking for. How many square feet, how many trees are gonna be cut, that sort of thing will all happen under the notice of intent. They're gonna submit their notice of intent. I can almost guarantee you that they're gonna pay their peer reviewer to review that notice of intent and work out the details. After that, it's still gonna go to the planning board. Planning board's gonna have to issue a special permit, so there's gonna be a number of hearings there as well, so I just want to let folks know that this isn't a, one hearing and it's done. There's gonna be a lot of back and forth between the developer and the commission on two different applications, one to decide where the boundaries are, and two to decide on the specifics of the project. Then there's probably gonna be back and forth from the planning board and the developer. I will be sitting in the audience. And that's, there's gonna be stormwater, there's a whole bunch of other issues that are gonna come up on this, so if you don't get your answer today, it's probably because they really.
Because they don't
can't give
know.
you the answer. You still have to work out the. So I just wanted to put that out there. I'm having flashbacks to my last few.
Yeah.
hearings, so
Thank you.
I just
Thank you
wanted to
much.
put that out there.
You said it well.
Yes.
I'm 535 Glendale Road, St. Helens. I just need clarity on what you said about that other map, because there was construction done on that property illegally, I'm sure. I remember all that going on. What supersedes? Because they did stop the perennial flow with what they did. Does that prior map supersede what's happening now because that was on?
No, what supersedes is what they find now.
So it doesn't matter that
But if they
changed.
look at those wetlands and what they find is there's a big chunk of dirt that's all exactly the same, that probably wasn't deposited there naturally,
Right.
then, for instance, we can require remediation. We can make them take it out. When you buy a property, one of the ongoing state rules is whatever environmental issues there are with that property, you inherit. So like when they built the power station over off of Allen, they had been dumping back there. There was a dump from the former owners, and they had to take out the whole dump and recreate the swamp that had been there in order to work there. So that could happen. I'm not saying that will happen. It depends very much on what Ty and Bond thinks. They have the old papers, they have the new papers. They can give us an opinion on what they think is going on there. They may decide it's a perennial stream, wetlands or not, if water's always running through it. They may decide it's really an intermittent stream, and whether or not this dirt was plowed over it, that it really is an intermittent stream. All of those things can happen.
Is the way you guys approach surveying district part of wetlands the same whether it's the forestry project, right?
Yes and no. Because you mentioned forestry. The forestry department existed a long time before the EPA and all the other subsequent environmental things came into being. So when they created Wetlands Protection Act rules, they had to incorporate the forestry rules. And because of that, and because they wanted to encourage forestry for lots of reasons, like not having fires that take over like in the West, forestry has a lot of leeway as far as environmental things, guidelines that they have to follow. They still have to avoid really sensitive areas. They might be restricted to a time of the year in natural heritage property, because when the turtles are out walking around, they don't want them run over with vehicles. So forestry has separate rules. Agriculture has other separate rules that don't give them quite as much leeway, but do allow them to do things like drive through a stream to get to their place they're mowing, for instance. So those two sets of rules are different. Generally speaking, otherwise, the rules are the same, except that there are recent solar guidelines, which in some places are more strict and in some places are a little bit less strict. Mostly in access roads. The pile of new solar guidelines is about this tall. Okay, is there anybody on the commission who has a question?
No. Not at this point, no.
Yeah, yeah. So next time we'll have the contract for the peer review and we'll be discussing what is going to go on to that. Hopefully, you know, that depends on Ty and Bond. They may feel they need more time to prepare that. Yes,
What's the contract design for peer review? I don't know how long that hopefully would take, but I'm assuming that'll all be online for us to access, right? Like just like the NRAD was.
the contract probably wouldn't be.
No, I mean the final result of your review.
No, not usually. You could come into the Concom and look at those results, but we usually don't have them in a kind of an emailable form where they're easy to send around, but you can come in and look at them. And you can come to the meeting, and that would be 1 or 2 meetings after we sign the contract, or maybe 3, depending on what they need to see. And they will explain all of those, all their measures and everything.
Curious what they found versus what these people found, what differences, just, you know, as a concern.
Yeah, that's the meeting where you would hear all of that. And then after we hear all of that, then we go back and they'll take us on a site visit so we can see all the things that they think they've figured out. And then we'll decide if we can make orders that make us feel that the wetlands are secure. That's all part of the NOI. But there may be some orders that we want to do at the end of the NRAD.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Did Ty and Bond give us a timeline
No,
of when they would expect to get to this?
no.
No, because we had to vote tonight to
Yeah,
actually.
we have to
hire
vote to actually have them.
I was just
And-
wondering when you were talking with them, if they had an idea when you get to it in April or.
It's a very, very big company.
She said
So-
that, that, you know, that because they're all clear and there's no conflict, so they can do it, that she will, once this all gets through, she will be talking to Nick. She'll be working with Nick out in the field and whatever.
Yeah. Usually, they want to wait till at least the middle of April, and we'll only be looking at the contract then. So probably by the time that all gets settled and the money gets sent in and verified and all that, Cindy can tell you all the details of that. It's very complicated.
And-
Then they start to actually look. It'll be the end of April, I would guess.
She needs to have the
That's when the
vegetation.
flows would be the highest. We're talking about these perennial streams.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, timeline, I was just wondering, you know, for spring, summer, you know, where we fall with this.
You gotta
Yeah.
get some vegetation up too. So.
Yeah, the
Well, she
vegetation
was
matters.
definitely talking spring. I mean, I didn't
Yeah,
have a,
you're gonna have the skunk cabbage coming up.
Yeah.
right.
Probably be the end of April, May. They will do their initial work and then come back and discuss it. And then we probably won't walk the whole 50 acres. I couldn't if I tried. But they will take us to the places they think are critical for us to see that are, for instance, under contention or important to the issues. All right, any others? If you have a question between now and the next meeting, please email Bonnie, and I'll try to answer them by email if she can't, or I might just tell you that's not in the NRED, it's in the NOI, and we'll discuss it at the 3rd or 4th meeting. Anything else? Thank you very much for being gracious and peaceful.
They had a long ride.
Yes, and they had a long ride.
Thank you very much for your time.
Wait. We need to vote to continue this
Our next meeting.
till our next meeting.
third Wednesday in April.
April, do you know what the third Wednesday in April is? The date for the third Wednesday in April? We're trying to take a motion to continue.
20th.
Okay.
20th.
Be the 20th,
April 20th.
20.
Thank you.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so it's continued to the 20th.
Is there any way you guys could make it 2 weeks if you're just gonna discuss the contract?
Make it 2 weeks? Oh, I don't think that Melissa will have a contract till then.
Okay. Is there- Make it to the, is that the next scheduled meeting?
The next scheduled meeting is the 20th.
Okay.
If we did one on the first week, that would be a special meeting. And we usually do that either when there's so much overflow we can't handle it, or because we're almost at the end and we just want to get it published.
No, we understand, it's just, I'd like to get it going as quickly as possible.
Yeah. They won't be doing any assessments until the middle of April anyway, so.
Again, I'm at the commissioner's program. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, guys.
We will send you the contract so you can be prepared for the meeting.
Thank you so much, you did a great job of explaining the separation.
Yeah.
It's tough.
Thank you.
All right, are we,
No, we voted.
Chair?
Yes, we voted to continue.
Chair?
All in favor? Let's do it again.
Aye. Is she ending the meeting? I need to know.
Okay, no, we're not ending the meeting.
Let me see.
Pardon?
No.
No.
We're not ending it? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, I was glad you were here because that's the bridge. Yeah. Mark told us he washes his hands.
We abandoned that year. We abandoned maintenance.
The forester said it's not part of the project, which is, and he's right, there's nothing that's wrong with it. So we just have to get silk to not be running through it. So we may come to the selection for that and get them to do that. I suspect that it's little stretches of maybe 50, I think maybe 60, 70 feet of water. And if they're small.
So who's responsible?
I mean, they're right that they essentially voluntarily plowed before they were, when they weren't doing forestry there, Josh Martin and his wife were volunteer.
Because their son's building a house.
But there were at some point, no matter what he says, that there were berms. And that was the first protest we got, was that the berms were on.
We are not done yet. We still have no road to
Well,
do.
I think maybe turn radius, but bottles, we would certainly allow them to just get a bottle, set aside their bottle for the day. It was a very nice crowd, though. They were very supportive.
Yeah. Yeah. I was about that as well.
Yeah, I'm projecting.
Thanks for coming.
Okay, we do have other issues to consider.
I'm still recording here.
Yes. Yes, some of them did, some of them didn't. Okay, the emergency order on Mill Road. We did get an RDA for that project. I sent around. Hey, Andrew, we're talking about Mill Road.
Yes.
The Mill Road Bridge has a big hole in it. You can see the water. So he did submit an RDA. I gave him emergency permission to continue with the work, but we do still have to do an official meeting to discuss all of it, even though we gave him, just to make sure that we don't disagree with me having given an emergency order, etc. So that'll be in our next meeting. I don't think we have to publish it if it's emergency order, but I would leave that to you. I don't think so. Yeah. It's not natural heritage area. If they drop something, it'll be land underwater, but as long as they stay with that sheet underneath and
Yeah, they
everything.
have a catch underneath.
Yeah, my determination was that they're pretty much on the bridge. Well, that's the question. At least it has to be posted 2 days before the meeting. It was posted for this meeting. Yes, and we'll post it again. Just because we don't have copies of the RDA and I don't want to count on everybody having read it. Yes, okay. A motion? All in favor? Okay, so that's continued. Okay, now we have the Wilbraham Road pond view thing. We are told that there is a forest cutting plan.
We don't have copies of it.
Yeah, Nicholas Turnberg, who lives in East Long Meadow, bought the property in February. I guess he must have already had the forest plan prepared. Oh, hi. Okay. Oh, nice to meet you. Okay. So, Nicholas Turnberg bought the property in February. I think he already had the forest cutting plan prepared, but apparently it's been granted, the forest cutting plan. We are supposed to see it before it gets implemented. We have 10 days to respond. We haven't seen it. And I have sent, there's kind of an issue because the former service forester, who's the person we talked through, was moved to a different department around Christmas time, I guess it was. Thank you. Thank you. We now, as of like a week ago, we have now an interim service forester. And I'm sending him stuff and trying to get his opinion on what parts of this are issues. The complaint that came through from Boston, that was somebody separate, I presume.
I made no complaint.
Oh, okay, there's an official site where you can file in Boston a complaint. We got a separate one. It comes down through regional and comes to us. That was also sent to the forester and to Natural Heritage because there were claims in that complaint about working near the vernal pools. There's a certified one and a non-certified one, and near the deep water marsh area. And so we sent that on to Natural Heritage for their comment. Tom went up there this morning and took pictures, which we've also sent to the forester and Natural Heritage.
One of them is your driveway.
And Natural Heritage.
We can't go on the property, so we have to try and do what we can from the edges.
Natural Heritage did send a letter back that I got a copy of today, and it said that the entire property, as you probably know, is all under rare and endangered species.
Yes.
And that to avoid prohibitive take of the eastern box turtle, their division, the Natural Heritage is requiring the following statements, and beginning off-road operation of motorized vehicles can only happen during November 1st and March 31st of any year. So
they're running out of time too. I think that's why they're pushing so hard.
and intentional soil scarification shall not be conducted with use of motorized tools, equipment, unless otherwise approved ahead of time by the NHASP in writing.
And what that pertains to is after they've cut, what they typically do is they drive a little machine between, if they don't take out the stumps, between all the stumps or across the land to open up the soil so they can put a seeding down. And that's called scarification. If they do it when the turtles are hibernating, they hibernate just under the soil, barely covered. And so they could damage them. So that period of time is limited. Or I guess they're saying only non-powered tool methods. So they could go with rakes, for instance.
So they can still cut them.
They,
They're not
like I
planning
said,
to-
forest cutting rules are very lenient. They can't destroy the vernal pools. They can't do scarification. They can't knowingly run over any turtles. But they're allowed very large leeway. One of the rules says they can't drop logs into the vernal pool, which is, to my way of thinking, kind of a, like, really? But if they drop it in, there are certain rules about how to get it out or whether they get it out, etc. But they have a lot of leeway with what they do. However, I would like to have an assurance that the new service forester has been up there and walked on the property and given us an opinion about whether things are being done the way they should. And we should get a copy of the plan, which I've requested to many folks. The other thing that happened is our DEP circuit rider, who's our local contact to DEP, got fired in December. So we don't, and so did, and the regional director retired. So we've been, until very recently, we didn't even have a contact. We had to go straight to the top to talk to somebody. So now we have also an interim circuit rider. So we have people we can work through. Copperheads are considered endangered. They haven't been, they aren't shown on any of the maps. They aren't indicated in our biomap 2 list.
Have you gotten a picture?
So
You said you've
I'm
been
sorry.
working with somebody, right?
yes and no, sir. The phone I took those pictures on is water damaged.
Yeah.
Oh,
And I never shared them with my ex-wife, who was my wife at the time, because she was terrified of garter snakes.
oh,
So I never shared those with them, but yeah, I have been in communication with the folks at Division of Fisheries and Wildlife,
with Miss Deanne or with somebody else?
with Miss Deanne
And Amanda,
and Amanda. She was the original recipient of the email that I copied the Conservation Commission on. I copied the Conservation Commission just because, I know that the forest cutting plan is something that the commission is required to be copied on. And through those conversations, we were able to address my concerns with the Copperheads. I grew up in Hampton. And I'm a wildlife hobbyist, you could call it that. I'm not a
You wanna come on?
biologist or anything like that. I
yeah,
am an avid bird watcher. I hold no professional certifications as far as identifying wildlife go, but I have seen copperheads in my yard every summer since 2016. I had no idea they were listed, not only as threatened, but endangered until, the neighbors and I started chatting, and we realized that there was an impending operation that was going to happen.
Yeah.
In this tract of land behind
Yeah.
our house. And, I've been in communication with DCR, Fish and Wildlife, and now the Conservation Commission. So I appreciate you folks bringing this up. That's the whole purpose why I came to the meeting. It's great to see you folks in action. I really appreciate what everyone does here as a volunteer for the town and the townspeople. With that said, the notice that went out to abutters that's required by the DCR folks, that according to the interim forester was sent out prematurely, and the permit was, the plan was still under review by Natural Heritage.
that's what it seemed like to us, but we only have a suspicion of that.
So that was confirmed to me via phone call
So
yesterday.
they sent that out like the 4th,
Right.
which means we should have gotten the plan by now if
We-
the plan was already signed.
So
So that made me
I
think, no.
believe the plan, now this is just a private citizen who's talked to some people from state agencies regarding this matter. I have seen a copy of that document you had, ma'am, electronically. And that was from the forester on fisheries letterhead. And then I got in the body of an email today from Division of Fisheries confirmation, or not confirmation, but they stated the same thing that document says in the body of their email, which was these two things. You know, you can't cut unless it's between November 1st and March 31st, and then the other thing, no scarification.
Yeah.
So
I
that-
noticed that they list only the turtles. They don't list the copperheads.
Right, so that's new information to them, and I'm, working in cooperation with Division of Fisheries and Wildlife to address that. And we'll see what the state comes back with. In the
Maybe they'll
meantime-
send somebody out to come. They're one of the few people who can go on the property. So through the service forester, they can get permission to go and screen the property and look.
So
for the copperheads.
I've welcomed any visit by state regulatory officials or municipal representatives, to come and check out
Yeah.
whatever they need to. On our property. If I had known that these were
Yeah,
not only protected but endangered here in the
Yeah.
Commonwealth, I would have taken action years ago.
there's 3 known colonies. One is in the Blue Hills near, between Boston and Worcester. Yeah, the other 2 are in the Connecticut Valley. And they don't typically, they tell the towns that they have a particular kind of wildlife. They don't usually tell you exactly where because they don't want people to go there and, for instance, and steal them. They've had a terrible time with people going to properties and digging up turtles. So they just put those numbers on, and then when you're dealing with the property, they tell you what animals are there. So I don't know where those other 2 colonies are, but it sounds like since they haven't responded to you yet, that would be a 4th colony out, not one of the known 3.
And as far as the turtles are concerned, I have seen photographic evidence of populations back there. According to one of the other constituents in the neighborhood, they have observed tagged turtles back there, with some type of identifier that Fish and Wildlife has put on them. I haven't seen that documentation. I've seen other photos, and I've encouraged those individuals to report them.
Yeah.
Accordingly. With
If
that all
any come
said-
across your property, use your phone with your GPS on, take a photo or 2, and send it into the Atlas people.
And with all this said, Commissioner, I echo your sentiments from the 530 Glendale Road matter that was discussed. I'm an advocate for active forestry and managing the forests here in the Commonwealth, especially here in the town of Hamden, where I live and where I grew up. And I don't want to impede anybody's livelihood or anything like that. I just want to do the right thing by Mother Nature. And, had I known that that the species was endangered, years ago, whether that would have brought us to a different place than we're at today, I don't know. I don't think so.
It's hard to know,
That habitat has been designated natural heritage for some time, at least since 2016.
Yeah. it
Um,
does.
So, I'm talking a lot here. I guess basically what I wanted to do is just hear what the commission had to say, and I appreciate some time to speak.
Yeah, if you can get pictures of any of them, that either of the turtles, any salamanders that may come out across your property from that vernal pool, or the snakes, then make sure they get to us, but also to the forester and natural heritage.
And like you've been doing, talk to your neighbors. See if
Exactly.
they know.
So in 2017, when we had that large rain event in October, again, this is on the phone that got water damage that wasn't backed up. I got a yellow spotted salamander, but I've since learned that that's not a listed species.
No, it's
They're
not
too
protected.
common.
It's evidence of a nice vernal pool, but it's not considered protected.
Sure.
They're marble ones, which we don't have, but we do have four-toed of several kinds. The ones we've seen the most, I think, are the bluish marbly looking ones.
And just kind of on a side note, I don't have a positive idea of this reptile, but I believe it was a copperhead. I saw a sharp-shinned hawk perched about halfway up Pond View on one of the trees. He swooped down. he or she swooped down, grabbed it up in its talons and, started going down.
They will definitely do that.
In the tree. So it was pretty cool. So it's a great habitat up there. And, I think that the forest should be managed appropriately. And I wanted to, part as a citizen.
Do keep in touch with us.
Certainly.
If it comes up at any other meetings, we'll try to make sure you get included on the mailing list so you can
Thank
come.
you. Thank you.
Anything else?
No.
Okay, we're just pursuing the forester still in the cutting plan. Because what we're allowed to do is we can't really change it, but we can comment, we can say, we don't think you've taken a wide enough berth around the vernal pools or things like that. And he can tell us to go forget it, or he can respond to that. That's up to, everything we do has to be through the service forester.
Can't see it.
So,
This one, just-
yeah, it's very, yeah, he's smart. He's done
And
this
if,
before.
in your discussions, if you get any paperwork that gives any credibility, please forward to us.
Very
From the state.
Yes, state forest, anything,
Sure.
They're supposed to include us.
Usually.
Yeah, he runs a
supposed
landscape
to.
company. He's on that.
A lot of times,
He has
we
huge
were
equipment.
blindsided by this.
I imagine he's gonna just- he's not
So
gonna hire a
if
lot
you
of
happen to
people
get
to
something
do
that
it, yes.
is any kind of
Maybe not.
official,
Well, I've been exploring all the channels, sir,
Yeah.
public records, requests, et cetera. So
Yeah.
I've been
Yeah,
working
it's got his name on it.
with DCR. and, So I will keep you folks posted. So thank you.
Thank you for
Appreciate
coming.
you guys do for the town. Nice to see you. All right. You take it.
What's that?
All right. See ya.
All right, is there anything else?
Oh,
Oh, Tom wanted to talk about South Road.
Yeah, I took a ride on South Road before I came to the meeting there, and it's wood on top of the foundation. Looks like just a silt plate so far. So they are working up there. All the silt fences are down.
all the turtle fences? Well,
So right now, part of the forest, which that sounds like right now, they better put it up for the end of the
I was
month.
just gonna
Yeah.
say
Yeah.
that, yeah.
He's got till approximately 15th of April to get it back up.
No,
It sounds like they must be
April 1st.
responding to climate change because it was always April 15th and now I noticed she said March 30th. So I
Yeah,
suspect
right.
So-
March 3rd.
they've
So we
expanded the
send them a
warm
letter or
period.
something, we should probably send them a letter right away.
Yeah,
Can you do that one?
yeah, I'll do it tomorrow.
Okay. And just tell him we saw the barriers were down, the spring is coming, he's got to put them up and he's got to keep them up. They can't fall down.
Letter.
If he does it right now, we don't
Yeah.
We,
you can do
we
it.
don't have to make him do another screen.
If
'cause he
does it
hasn't.
within the,
Right.
A few days, fine, but.
Yeah,
I'll
he
go
should,
check
he should
again
be able to
next
get
week.
it up. And there's things he can do
We're talking about the guy that.
down on South Road.
That has a long driveway.
Downstairs?
He's got a really long driveway off the right-hand side of
He's
South
right
Road.
across from the big.
Turnberg, right across from Turnberg's big farm.
I don't
Some
know if
things
we
you
did that
should
up there.
include is that there's ways of reinforcing that fence with stock fence behind
There
it,
was a guy.
stock fence.
Stop.
Yeah, it's called stock fence.
What is a stop?
It's just a cheap kind of fence that's more solid than chicken wire.
Oh, okay.
It's, and it essentially has small holes at the bottom and big holes at the top because of different size animals. But what really matters is that it's pretty stiff. There's ways of reinforcing it with stock fence and posts. And he should look into doing that because hay bales, they don't like hay bales for turtles because the turtles can crawl up over them
Oh,
and use them to go over the fence. So
Yeah.
stock
well,
fence
he's
is
got a-
going to be,
he's got a dirt road.
yeah,
So I got the letter. to
stock
Tom.
fence is going to be designed.
Doing that tomorrow.
So,
Yeah.
nothing.
You can get, stock fence comes in all heights, but you can get like 3-foot stuff. And so what you do is you put it behind it and then you staple it to it and then you put posts on the fence so that it just keeps it from all collapsing.
If he hasn't done it like that. send us some-
Yeah, we're gonna have to tell him he
Yeah,
can't
okay.
build.
Yeah, I'll have to put in the letter that
I didn't see anybody working.
He
this
only
time,
has
but-
Yeah, we don't want to threaten him, but he's really been very lax about following up on things. So we want to make sure he's knows that he has to do
And they
it.
did a nice job at the trail. with all the tree
Yeah, all the trees are
Yeah.
gone.
Now
Excellent.
they can fix the driveway parking area.
Yeah,
Yeah.
It's pretty good.
Dana used to
I think that the select board is gonna look for some more money to do that. I'm not sure. But that was my understanding. They didn't want to do another CPA thing. They want to just pull it from some available monies.
I know, it's back.
And we're still, I think maybe next meeting, we'll finally have the,
No vision.
the Mount Vision NOI. Heather's been very slow, and then Gary was very slow, and
Yeah.
now Heather's trying to talk to Gary because she has to write out the descriptions of exactly how things are gonna happen. And that's taking a lot of time. She's working on it right now. Okay. Okay. Motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion.
Who's gonna second that?
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, I did write up a description